Welcome to DMA Day 3. We're really excited to be wrapping it up here. It's been a great event. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Steve Silvers from Neustar. I run our DMP business.
Great, very nice. And what brings you to the DMA this
So
year?
I actually was invited to speak, so I had 2 different sessions at the Transparency Zone yesterday. The conversation was really, really lively. It was a really fun, interesting time.
Great, so talk to me a little bit about what you were talking about with transparency and what maybe some of the questions were. The conversation
So sure, we had 2 different sessions. One was around the data label initiative that the DMA is working on with some of the other big organizations in marketing. And that was a very interesting conversation where we were talking about what the goals of data transparency were, what we were hoping for the label. And people asked some really good questions. I think, what we're really talking about here is elevating the game of conversation around data in the industry. I mean, everyone talks about big data, everyone talks about doing data and people-based marketing, but I don't think that anyone necessarily knows how to do it correctly. And we all use these terms and we throw them around and they mean different things to different people. So one of the great things that we achieved with the label is we started defining the terms with industry specific terms, and so now we're able to have better conversations.
Interesting. So give me an example of some of the terms you've defined.
Well, so one of the things that we've been really talking about a lot, especially when it comes to identity resolution, which is what Neustar is really focused on, is the definitions of deterministic and probabilistic when it comes to identity resolution. And the industry has some really sort of visceral reaction to these words, where deterministic, everyone it sounds good, and probabilistic, it sounds bad because it's probably true. We actually have done
Never a comfort zone for
no,
data people.
But we've done a lot of data science, and we found that those gut reactions are not necessarily factually based. And so that's an example of something where we're able to start actually defining terms and then putting data behind them, and then making people giving people the ability to test whether or not their innately held beliefs are true or not. So if you're looking at a data segment and you're looking at whether it was modeled or observed, most marketers are going to look at that and say, well, modeled is probably bad and observed is probably good. But if you look at the performance, that may not be the case. And right now, when people buy data, it's all just sort of obfuscated, and you can't. It's a black box. You don't know, and so you just take your preconceived notions. But now with the label, you'll actually see how the segment is constructed, and you'll be able to test out those assumptions. And if you go head to head between a modeled audience and an observed audience, you can find which one performs better for you.
Okay, great. Now talk to me a little bit about what your role is at Neustar.
Today, I'm the product owner for our data management platform. We call it the Neustar IDMP. It's an identity data management platform. So that's what the I is there for. And so I'm responsible for that business, and I'm responsible for making sure that it's successful. And so, but I'm also the product owner for the platform that we use for a lot of our other marketing solutions technologies. And so I tend to get involved even with other parts of our business outside of the one that I'm responsible for when we're talking about things like data quality, identity resolution, data normalization, because that whole platform that runs is something that I'm familiar with.
Okay, and talk to me a little bit about, from an identity resolution perspective, what do you guys bring to the table? How are you unique?
Well, so again, good question. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Talking about probabilistic versus deterministic data, and as you build your identity graph. And we call it an identity graph, not a cross-device graph, because we're really looking at doing people-based marketing. And in order to do people-based marketing, you really need those cross-device clusters, those browsers and mobile devices that you've clustered together that travel together. You need to connect them to people or households, the things that you actually want to market to, because my iPhone doesn't really buy any products, but I do. My household consumes things, but my laptop really only consumes power. So we definitely want to make sure that we're focused on marketing towards people and not devices. So that's why we call it an identity graph.
So are you putting psychographics around it then as well?
So we do have data sets that come with the platform that help you do that. And so when we're talking about this, we have 3 sort of parts of our business and marketing solutions that we focus on. We have a part that's called customer intelligence, and that's really all about identifying and knowing who your customer is, and that building your own segmentation, fixing your CRM data, that kind of stuff. We do that to make sure that you have that good 360-degree view of the customer. And then we have a part of the business we call customer experience, which is mostly what I'm responsible for. And that's really about taking that data, your knowledge of the customer, and using that and pushing that into the ecosystem to build rich, personalized experiences for those customers, or prospects. It could be prospects too. And then we have customer analytics, where we take and measure the effectiveness of those experiences against those segments, those customers, and then figure out what worked, what didn't work, and pour those insights back in so that you're changing your segmentation, you're changing the way you're building your experiences to optimize based on the results. And that builds like this virtuous circle. And then we use our identity resolution to kind of pull all of those things together. Because in order to really connect the dots on those things, you need to have this rich data fabric where you take all these different data from all these different sources and you layer them together. And you can't just lay them side by side. Like, you actually have to weave them together, and identity resolution is the key to that, because you identify who the person or household was that saw that ad, whether it was on Facebook or on TV or direct mail or wherever it was. You see who saw the ad, you see all the interactions you had with that person, and then you can value all of those interactions and the incrementality across it all using multi-touch attribution. But you have to be able to connect all the dots in order to do that. And that our system allows you to do that, and ours is the best because we don't just do probabilistic or deterministic. We do something we call federated, which is a marrying of the two. And so deterministic data is a point-to-point linkage between like a cookie or a mobile ad ID and some sort of login event. And most people think that is a very good, strong signal, and it often is, because if someone comes and they log into your website, you're pretty sure that they are who they say they are. But even on your website, when they do that, you know that you have a certain amount of fraud on your website, whatever it is. There's some people that are logging in, pretending to be people they're not. There are bot farms and cookie farms all over the world where they're doing that, and they're generating traffic, and they're logging in. Now, the problem with the deterministic data market in general is that it's a wholesale market. So basically, people are selling these linkages of cookies and mobile ad IDs to email addresses and phone numbers, and it gets magnified the more people you have in a space. So you can imagine that you're buying from someone who bought it from someone who bought it from someone, and initially, maybe it's only 10 or 15% of the logins on a particular website that happen to be fraudulent, but that grows as you deal with all these different people in the industry. And so then when you look at the linkages that we get and that we're buying and we're utilizing to help our customers, and about half of them we end up throwing away. And so some of that is that fraud that we're talking about. There's also just basic.
How are you determining where the fraud is?
Well, we bounce the data up against truth sets is one of the things that we do that. But we're using machine learning algorithms, the same machine learning algorithms you use for probabilistic graphs. And we're using the same machine learning algorithms to score both sets of data. And so what we found is that probabilistic data, when you have it at scale, can be really, really accurate. And as I was describing, the more data you have that you're accumulating for probabilistic, the better your graph gets. The more data points you have, the more scale. Your graph gets more and more accurate as you get more scale. Your deterministic graph actually ends up working the other way, because there's the known good that you have, and as you try to expand that by buying it from folks, the level of quality goes down and down, right? And so in order to build a highly accurate graph at scale, you kind of need both approaches. But you can't just smack the two things together. You can't just buy a deterministic graph from one person and a probabilistic graph from someone else and just smack them together. Because what you'll end up with is just two graphs that don't match. And so, how do you tie the deterministic graph and the probabilistic graph together in a way that's meaningful? And what you end up doing is you use deterministic linkages to try to map the two together, and so you get like a little bit of overlap that and then you have a lot of stuff that you don't know whether they overlap or not. It ends up being sort of suboptimal. What we're doing is we're taking all the data and we're scoring all of it as you would a probabilistic graph. And so one of the great things about the machine learning and probabilistic graphing is that it's not binary. It's not a yes or no thing. You get a score. You can imagine the scores between 0 to 100, but it doesn't really matter. But you're able to sort of figure out where you want to make the cut for
nice.
certain use cases based on your confidence, right? So if you are comfortable with 85% confidence that it's accurate, you can get a certain amount of scale. If you want more scale, you can drop it down to 70. If you want more accuracy, you can pull it up. And so because we're using the machine learning algorithms to do it, we have a lot more flexibility in how we draw the lines and build the graph. Whereas with pure deterministic, it's either true or false, and you got to look for some other points to use to score it. And this is tough. Like there is, we talk about big data and more data and more data. We threw off more data in 2017 than we had in the previous 5,000 years. And so,
and it's only
getting worse, right? And so, the big data is often too much data, and people struggle to deal with it. And so, one of the advantages of working with us is we do clean up the data for you. It is well articulated. It's got.
Do you help interpret the data for people as well?
We do help people interpret the data. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about agencies want to do that themselves. Like they want to be the people that interpret the data, and that's their job. And we work with them to make sure that they're doing it right. But I mean, we work with folks like that, and the brands too. It's really about differentiating their marketing business, right? It's how do I build I leverage my data, my first party data, along with whatever other data sets I can get. How do I build a unique offering that is better than what my competitors have, right? And so that means that all of our customers, all of our partners, they're developing their own sort of strategy and their own models, and they're building their own stuff on top of our platform, and then those are differentiated. We're not just selling pure off-the-shelf components. Like we're working with our customers to build differentiated, unique solutions to allow them to get an edge over their competitors.
Interesting. So now, with GDPR and the anticipation of that coming to the US, have you had to change some of your models and your systems?
Now, as the needs of our clients change, and the regulations change, obviously we're going to have to adapt. And I think we're in a really interesting time right now. We've got a lot of talk about consent and having real conversations with consumers about the data that we collect and we use. And I think this is a really great opportunity for marketers to take control of their data governance and their data strategy. And I think the marketers that are smart and do that are going to have great data sets going forward, because they're going to clean up their acts, they're going to make sure that they have records of everything, they're going to make sure that they're getting the consent if they need it, or whatever sort of basis for using the data is necessary, and they're keeping records of it, and they're keeping it with the data. And marketers, if you want to be successful, is your opportunity now to do this. And if you can take advantage of it within your own organizations, and you can become a leader within your own organization by taking the initiative and building a strong data governance policy and a data strategy around that data governance policy. So that way, whenever the regulations come, you'll have data that you can use. I mean, the two problems that we have. Number one is, as the regulations change, data where you don't have an understanding of the context of how you collected it and how you can use it, if you don't have that and the laws change, you may not be able to use that data, right? And so it's years and years of collected data that will no longer be useful to you. That's a problem, right? And then number two, data that is collected gets used, and often gets used for ways that it was not initially designed to be used. And that's a great thing. Like, we have a great industry where there's innovation. I think that's awesome. And I definitely think that people should be looking at their data sets and making sure that they're coming up with new ways to use data. I think it's great, but if you don't know the context that you got the data from and what the allowed uses of it were, and then you try to innovate on top of that data, you may get yourself in trouble. And again, these are things that aren't a problem today for most marketers, but in 2 years they may be.
So talk to me about, as we wrap up, what's your biggest concern looking into 2019?
My biggest concern going into 2019. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty now. There's a lot of swirl about some of the third-party cookie conversations that have been happening. Safari's made some changes. Mozilla's said that they're going to make some changes. There's a lot of confusion, and to be honest, the regulations that have been passing in Europe and California are sort of at odds with some of the technology decisions that are being made. And so, we're going into a world where we're trying to learn to manage consent on cookies in Europe that the browsers may or may not ever let us place in the first place. And so there are these different sort of initiatives that have momentum and they're colliding, and we want something obviously that is good for the consumer and but allows the industry to continue. And the uncertainty, I think, is causing anxiety. And so I think that getting to a point where we understand what's going to happen and that we are aligning the technology with the regulation, I think will be very helpful.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's been great having you here. Thank you for stopping by the booth.
Oh,
It's been a
thank
pleasure.
you.